Good morning, Madison County. It's Jesse, and I'm back again to shoot the second installment of Social School, right? So this is lesson two. We're going to get into that first unit, which is social awareness, or kind of getting to understand ourselves a little better. And my goal for today is to talk about maybe why you're in this class, why people work in general, and kind of talk about what you need to be successful in the world of work, right? And I'm not going to have all the answers. I'm going to ask that you do a little bit of thinking on your own. I will tell you it is called social school, and the reason why is I'm going to make you think a little bit and maybe come up with some creative answers to some of these questions. So, where I want to start is I want for you guys just to think a little bit about why you're in this class, right? So, maybe somebody signed you up for it and it was just something to do to get credit. Maybe you're trying to get out of other classes. Maybe you've already got a job and you want to get some credit and get paid too. That's a pretty good idea. Or maybe it was just something to do. You had your favorite teacher, or there was another kid in that class. Just kind of give it some thought, right? And I'm going to ask you probably to answer that question for me at some point, write something out for me. But I want you to think about it, right? Why are you in this co op class? And what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about in general what makes people do what they do, right? So, why did you get up this morning? Why, do you go to school? Why do you do what you do, right? Just kind of thinking about yourself and what makes you tick. And the truth of the matter is that, the things that make you tick may be a little bit different than other people, but in general, people do what they do for the same reason, and we're going to talk about that. So where I want to go next is I just want to talk about some of the reasons why people work. And, most of the time when I ask this in the classroom, kids are just like, duh, the reason why I work is for that money, right? Moolah, Skrilla, whatever you want to call it, dinero. People are in it for the money, and that's why they work. And the truth of the matter is that is not always the reason why people do work. There are lots and lots of reasons why people work. Sometimes people want to go to work to get job experience. Sometimes people go to work to pay their bills, right? I don't know what kind of bills that you guys have got, but I've got some bills to pay, and so work does that for me. But there's all different kind of reasons. Sometimes people want to go to work just so that they can get out of their house, right? When I was your age, that was definitely a motivator. I didn't get along with my folks so much. And when I worked at my very first paying job, which was at Pizza Hut in Edwardsville, one of the really cool things was while I was there, I didn't have to listen to my mom. You know what I mean? Didn't have to deal with my dad. I got to be out of the house. Another reason why people work, though, and this is kind of personal to me, I went to work to stay out of trouble. Because while I was at work, I knew what to do. I always did the right thing. I made good choices. Well, maybe not always did the right thing, but in general, I did the right thing. I made good choices. But when I was hanging out with my buddies and I was outside, just messing around on the streets, there was a lot of trouble. And so for me, going to work was one of those things that really kind of helped me to stay out of trouble, right? And I knew that not only was I getting paid, but I wasn't getting arrested, and that was kind of a good thing. When I was your age, there was a lot of trouble to get into, right? Way back in the 1980s, we still got in a lot of trouble, and so there's lots of different reasons why people work. Um, and the thing that motivates you, right? I want you to think about that. Why do you really want a job? Are you maybe you are trying to pay your bills? Who knows? But I'm going to ask you to think about that, right? So why do you work? Or if you don't have a job, why do you want to work? Um, and so yeah, hopefully you give it some thought and maybe see if you can come up with like five different reasons why somebody might want to have a job, right? Um, and where I'm going to go with this is we're just going to talk about, what makes people do what they do in general. And you probably never thought about it. Sometimes I ask classes, I'm like, well, what makes people do what they do? Why do they do it? Right? And the truth of the matter is that it comes down to what it is that you really need, right? And so my personal belief is that people do what they do to meet their needs. And sometimes those needs are very real needs, like you might think that you need money. You might, maybe you ate breakfast today because you were hungry and you need food. Sometimes those needs are real. Other times, though, those needs are not so real and they're more of what I call perceived needs. And what that means is basically it's like what you want or what you think you need. A real good example for me is that I feel like I need a phone, right? So I run my business through my phone, and the phone doesn't pay for itself. And if I need a phone, then, I got to work, I got to do what I got to do. And do I need it to survive? No. But do I need it to run my business? Yeah, pretty much I do. A car, all these things. Why do people do what they do? And basically what it comes down to is my personal belief is that everybody does what they do to meet their needs. And some of those needs are real, like things you really need, and some of them are just things that you think you need. And honestly, for me, it doesn't make a real big difference, right? Because that's still what's motivating your behavior. That's what's making you do what you do. And I will tell you, so in video one, I told you I worked at the alternative school, and I'm going to tell you a real quick story about working at the alternative school. And this was a time back when I worked with those students. It was my job to help figure out, why are these kids doing some of the stuff that they're doing? And I had a real interesting story that happened to me one time. I was teaching a math class because that's part of what I did. I was teaching algebra, and in the middle of my algebra class, right, I'm up at the board, I'm doing like x plus 2 equals whatever, you know what I mean? I'm just writing out an algebra problem. I had this kid, he came up and tapped me on my shoulder. And when I turned around, I saw this kid who had pierced his own tongue with a safety pin in my math class, right? And so I got to tell you a little bit about this kid. So this kid's name was Brad. And Brad was about 5'2", 5'3". He was real muscular, right? Just one of those little like bulldog kids. And the reason why Brad was in the alternative school is that he had come out of detention for something called mob action, right? So Brad was one of those gangster kids. He was in one of those white power gangs. And if you don't know this, this is a gang sign for white power. Don't ever show anybody that. Shh. Anyway, he was in one of those gangs, and he had gone to detention for beating somebody up. And it wasn't just him, it was a bunch of his buddies, and they grabbed their chains and their baseball bats, and they beat somebody up pretty bad. And so he was in detention for 8 months. And when he got out, he came to me. He was in the alternative school, and he had been with me for about 2, 3 weeks before he came into my math class. And so here it is, I'm in the middle of math class, and I'm trying to figure out, what in the hell? Why would somebody do that, right? Why would somebody pierce their tongue in my math class? And he was bleeding all over the place, so I sent him out of the room, and I didn't see him for a few days. Because actually, just for the record, just so you know, it's not a good idea to pierce your tongue. Don't do that. Don't do that. Or if you're going to do it, at least have a professional do it if you're old enough. Because, piercing your tongue is dangerous. That kid ended up with an infection in his tongue. He was in the hospital for a few days. Yeah, it's not good. Anyway. So it's my job to figure out, why would somebody do that, right? Why would somebody pierce their tongue in school? Why would they pierce their tongue in math class? And so at that point, I had studied some psychology. I knew a little bit about people, and I'm kind of working myself through like what I think some of the typical scenarios might be, right? Maybe I thought to myself, maybe Brad did it because he hates math class, right? So I knew already after a couple of weeks, Brad hated math and especially algebra. He and I got along pretty well, but he's like, oh, Mr. Allen, I hate this class. This sucks, and sometimes he'd sleep in class and blah, 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 whatever. So I thought maybe he pierced his tongue just to get out of class. Seems a little extreme, but, that's what happened. So I thought about it a little more. And I thought maybe what he did was he did it to get attention, right? And so I'm thinking about it. And if you go up and you've got your tongue pierced in front of the whole class, everybody's going to notice. Because I immediately was like, whoa, what's going on here? And all the other kids are freaking out. And Brad, for that minute, he was the center of attention, right? Everybody was watching Brad. And so he walked out, and maybe he did it for attention. The more I thought about it, though, there were some other things to this story that I have to tell you. So I had mentioned before that Brad was in a white power gang, and of all the wannabe gangsters that were in my class, Brad was the only one that actually I think was probably a real deal. He had Southsider tattooed on his arm. He flashed the signs. Everybody knew that Brad was, one of these little white kids that just, got in with the wrong crew and was making some real bad choices. But I got to tell you something about the rest of my class, and I think that that'll kind of fill out the story, or tell you a little bit about more about why maybe Brad did what he did. Because here's the thing: Brad and I were the only white kids in that class. And of the 7 or 8 kids that I had in class, right, all of the other ones were African American students from Alton. And for the most part, they were wannabe gangbangers, right? So there was some of this and there was some of this, and they did all their little thing, and they were all wannabes, but some of them were really big. There was a kid in my class who was one of my favorite students of all time. His name was Rodney, and you're going to hear all kinds of stories about Rodney because I worked with him for like 3 years. But Rodney was 6'4". He weighed like 250 pounds, 300 pounds, something like that. Rodney was huge, right? And here's little Brad. And no matter how big and how tough he was, there was no way that he was going to be able to deal with Rodney. And so as I sat and I kind of thought about it, I talked with the social worker in the program and I kind of thought about it. I thought, you know what? Maybe Brad pierced his own tongue in class because he wanted to show everybody how tough he was, right? What a little badass Brad is, right? Everybody, oh my God, he's crazy. Don't mess with Brad. And as I thought about it, it made more and more sense, because typically what Brad would do is if he was out in the community and had to deal with a situation like that where he was outnumbered and everybody was, probably out to get him, he'd just get his buddies together and they'd all, they'd handle it. They'd do whatever they would do. And in this situation, he couldn't, because I was the only other guy, that for sure had his back. And, I'm not fighting, right? At that point, I'd lose my job. So I can't do anything about it. And so what I honestly think now, and I never got a chance to answer, ask him the question, but what I really think that Brad was doing was he pierced his tongue in my math class so that he could feel a little bit safer, right? Because he didn't feel safe. All those other kids were probably looking for an excuse, just a situation where they could jump him, and he didn't feel safe. And so he pierced his own tongue in my math class. Mr. Allen, I pierced my tongue. He did that to make himself safer. Now, if you think about it, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And the things that we do sometimes, they don't always make a lot of sense. And what you need to ask yourself is, what is it that I really need, and am I getting it? Or what am I doing to try to get what I need? And if you think about some of the very most successful people in your life, like whoever it is that that's super successful, maybe it's your folks or a teacher, or you look in the media, maybe you've got a YouTuber who's super successful. The thing that I can tell you about those people is they are doing a great job of getting their needs met, right? So the most successful people are the ones who get what they need. And maybe what they need is friends, and they need some education, and they need a job, or whatever it is that they need. But if you think about the most successful people in your life, chances are they're getting what they need. And the flip side of that is, if you think about the most unsuccessful people, right, the people who are really, really struggling, chances are they are not doing a good job of getting their needs met. They're not doing a good job of getting what they need. And you think about people who use alcohol and drugs because they don't want to, deal with boredom or deal with their feelings. You think about people who commit crime, or rob or steal to get money, right? So they're just like us. They're trying to get their needs met, but they're not doing it in a good way. And so what I want to do with this lesson today is I want to challenge you on a couple things. I want you to think about, specifically related to work, what is it that you need personally? What is it that you need personally to be successful at work, right? Maybe you have to have a certain uniform. Maybe you have to have transportation. Maybe what you need to do, though, is some more basic things, right? Get those very, very basic needs met. And what I'm talking about when I talk about basic needs, and for those of you that eventually I see in class, we're going to do this activity. We're going to talk about your very, very basic needs. I'm going to talk about everything from air, water, food, sleep, right? Those are like the big four. You add shelter in there, and that's the fifth one. Those are your basic needs. And for some of you, you're doing a good job of getting those needs met. You throw in exercise and, just that stuff on that bottom level. I want you to really think for a minute about, how are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you taking care of yourself and getting your needs met so that you can be successful, right? Sometimes the schoolwork thing is hard. And I know, for my daughter, I've got an 11-year-old who's trying to do this remote learning. And there was one day, it gets to about lunchtime, and I walk into the living room, and she's on her computer, and she's just crying. I'm like, Zinnia, what's going on? What's going on? She's like, I don't know. I can't find anything. It's just so terrible. Da, 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 da. And we start breaking it down, and the problem itself wasn't that bad. But what had happened was she had a rough night's sleeping, didn't eat any breakfast, basically was completely melted down by noon. After 3 hours of working on the computer, she was toast. And she didn't even have her toast, right? She didn't get breakfast. And I'm thinking, you know what? It might have been a little bit easier to deal with whatever problems it was that you were dealing with if you would take basic care of yourself. So I want you to think for a minute, are you getting enough sleep? And for guys your age or girls your age, it's probably somewhere between 8 and 9 hours. Believe it or not, you still need plenty of sleep, especially while you're growing, trying to grow your brain a little bit till you're in your 20s. Did you eat breakfast today, right? Have you taken care of yourself? Did you shower? Are you taking care of yourself in one way or another? And so, again, just want you to think about, if you're working, are you getting what you need to be successful at work? If you're trying to do your schoolwork, are you getting what you need to be successful in school? Are you getting your needs met? And where I'm going to close this, because usually I like for the videos to be somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, where I want to close this is I just want to challenge you to take better care of yourself, to really think about what it is that you need and how can you go about getting it in the right way, right? How can you go about getting your needs met so that you can be successful at work, successful in school, successful in whatever it is that you want to do? Because I'm here to tell you that you're worth it. Please take care of yourself. And for those of you who are remote learning, I will see you in lesson 3. Thanks so much for your time. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye-bye.